We begin today the Gemara on Daf Yud Tes Amud Aleph, the second line from the top of the Yamud. The Gemara goes back to the Mishnah. It said V'loi nivrechas hakayfsin v'chulu, that you shouldn't have a pool that's made for washing, for laundering, near someone else's wall. Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rabba Baravua, Loishano elemen amachamtzen. This halacha that you have to distance it only three tvachim, that's the pool that's used to soak the clothing in it. They would have one pool of water where they would basically soak it in soap, as she says, tzayas klovim, and it would just soak there for a while. And then they would take it out and put it into another pool, and there they would actually wash it and launder it. So over here when it says only 3 tvachim is enough, is the pool that's used just for soaking. But the other one where you actually wash it, so over there's much more splashing of the water, dal damas. So you have to distance it much more, 4 amas. Tanya nami hachi, we learned this in a brayse as well, because the brayse says nefrechas hakayfsin, the pool for the launderer, dal damas. You have to distance it from the wall, 4 amas. So b'hanan tanan gimel tvachim, but the Mishnah says 3 tvachim. So we see that the Mishnah was talking about the mechamtzin, so that's 3 tvachim, and the brayse is talking about the nadyan, which is 4 amas. Veke, the Ramilum Merme, others said this by first asking a question. Tanan, and our Mishnah it says nevrechas hakayfsin gimel tvachim, that you have to distance it 3 tvachim. Vatanya, but in the brayse it says arba amas, that you have to distance it 4 amas. And Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rabba Baravua, and he answered like kashya, kan men mechamtzin. The Mishnah is speaking about the mechamtzin, kan men hadyan. Rav Chiya Berei de Ravivya mastin lo be'edya. Rav Chiya Berei de Ravivya taught, and he had the girsa clearly this way: Ela imkein hirchik misfas mechamtzon lo kaisel gimel tvachim. That you have to distance the pool of the mechamtzon where they soak it 3 tvachim. The next thing it said in the Mishnah was visod bisid. Besides this is going back to when you dig a pit. So it says you have to distance 3 tvachim. Besides you have to distance it 3 tvachim, you also should plaster the wall of your pit with plaster in order to there shouldn't be any leakage. It shouldn't damage your friend's pit. So the Gemara actually asks on this, or has a shaila on this, iboy lahu visod bisitnan visod bisit, meaning that you have to distance it 3 tvachim, and additionally you also have to put the plaster on the wall. Oidilme oisod bisitnan, or the right gears in the Mishnah is that you have a choice: either you can distance it 3 tvachim, and if not, as long as you plaster the wall of your pit, it's fine. Says the Gemara, Pshite, it's obvious, the visod besitnan, that here, when it talks about the pit, so it's saying that you have to do both. You have to distance your pit 3 tvachim, and you have to plaster it. Why? Because in the Sefer of the Mishnah, the Isol Kedaitoch, the oisod besitnan, because first with the Reisha, if here in the Reisha, where it says about the boyer, that it says that you can distance it, and you're going to say that it's giving you the option, or you can distance it 3 tvachim, or you could plaster it, so then imkein larvinu v'lisninu. If so, then this halacha here in the Reisha about the boyer should be taught together with the next case of the Mishnah. In the next case of the Mishnah, so Rashi, according to Rashi's pshat in this Gemara, the next case when it talks about amas hamayim, the vrechas hakayfsin, and all those things, so over there the Mishnah says that you have to be marchik 3 tvachim. Sorry, not the case of Nevrechas Kaifsin. I'm talking about the next case in the Mishnah actually, where it talks about Gefes, Zevel, Melach, other things that produce heat that you have to distance it. So over there, it says in the Mishnah, according to Rashi, in the Sefer, it clearly says either 3 tvachim or Yisod B'sid, or you could plaster to create a separation. So if you're going to say that in the Reish of the Mishnah regarding the boyer, it also says Oisod B'sid, so then Larvinu V'lisninu. Why doesn't the Mishnah say the halachas of the boyer and the halachas about the things that produce heat? Why doesn't it say it all together? So the fact that it separates it, so that makes it clear that in the Reish of the Mishnah, you have to do both. You have to distance it, and you have to also plaster it. Says the Gemara, no, that's not a raya. Maybe the reason why it separates the cases is not because the halacha is different, but because the damage, the kind of damage that it causes, is just not the same. Reisha hezeke de metuna, and the Reisha talks about a pit that stores water in it, or the launderer's pool, or other things like that. That the issue is the moisture. Seifa hezeke de havla. Then the next case it speaks about things that produce heat. And so therefore it mentions it separately, even though the halacha of distancing is the same. Okay, so we have this shaila. When it says in the Mishnah that plaster, does it mean that there must be also plaster, or it's either or? Toshima, so the Gemara says, let's bring a raya. Rabbi Yehuda says, Sela bo biyadayim. If you have sand, or that is Mishnah Lashon is a rock, what it means is sand that you pick it up, it's a very soft soil that crumbles in your hand. So then, if that's the kind of the condition of this earth here, so mikan, each one can dig a pit on his side of the border. So both of them have to be marchik this distance of 3 tvachim and has to put plaster that it shouldn't leak through. So now, what do you see from here? Taime the Babi Yadayim. It would seem that the reason why over here this Brisa says you must have both the distance and also plaster is because of the soil, which is very soft. But if it's not that kind of soil, it's a regular, harder, tougher soil, so it's not necessary to do both. In our Mishnah, you would have to be guided, that it's either or. And says the Gemara, no, not necessarily. Even if it's just a regular kind of soil, you still have to do both, to distance and to plaster. The only reason the Brisa says Babi Yadayim is because there's a chiddush here. I would think to say, even the Babi Yadayim, since it's a soft soil, you should have to distance it even more than 3 tvachim. Kamash Malan, that's why it's saying that it's enough 3 tvachim. The next case in the Mishnah was Marchikin Esagefes. These are the things that produce heat near another person's wall. It could ruin his wall. So the gefes is the leftovers of the olive press or v'sazevel, menor, v'samelach, salt, v'sasloim, flintstones that also produce heat. So you have to distance it 3 tvachim from his wall. Okay, so now here the Gemara brings from the Mishnah in Shabbos that talks about the halacha of atmana. On Shabbos, you're not allowed to hide or to insulate hot food inside things that actually add to the heat. Because then there's a gzeira that you may put it into coals and then you can come to extinguish the fire or to light the fire. So over there, Tanan Hasam, the Mishnah says, Bamet Taimnin, and what kind of materials are you allowed to insulate? Or Bamet Ein Taimnin, and in what are you not allowed to insulate? Ein Taimnin, you're not allowed to insulate in the following things that produce heat. Loi begefes, not in the leftovers of the olive press, v'loi bezevel, or the menor, v'loi bemelech, or the salt. Loi besid, not in lime. And v'loi b'choil, here it adds something that it doesn't say by us. Here it says not in sand either. Ben lach and ben yevation, whether the sand is moist or dry. Okay, so now the question is, Ma'ishna hacha diktani sloim. In our Mishnah, when it talks about distancing from a person's wall, it mentions these flintstones that produce heat. And in Shabbos, it doesn't mention that when it talks about insulating. And on the other hand, in the Mishnah in Shabbos, it mentions that sand produces heat, and you can insulate in it, you're not allowed to insulate in it on Shabbos. And by us, and over here, it does not say it. Again, why over there does it say chayil, sand, and it doesn't mention slum? Okay, so the Gemara asks the question on both, on our Mishnah and that Mishnah, why there's one that's different by both of them. So the Gemara answers, Amar Rav Yosef. The reason why, so Rav Yosef answers part of the question. The reason why over there it doesn't mention the slayim, because usually a person does not insulate hot food in a pot in these flintstones. And the reason is because it doesn't really insulate it well. There's holes, this stones is not insulated well enough, and the heat is going to escape from the holes that there are. So Abaye asks on this question, on this answer. But we see that even things that is not usually the derech to insulate are mentioned there. Is it usual for people to insulate food in the wool shearings or l'shayne shalagaman or a tongue of purple wool? This is wool that was dyed purple. People don't usually insulate with this. And it's mentioned over there. The Tanya, as it says there in a Braise, you're allowed to insulate in the shearings of wool, or the wool after it was combed, or a tongue of the wool, or in cotton. However, even though you would be allowed to insulate in them because it's not going to add to the heat. Only things that are ma'asav hevel you're not allowed, but you're not allowed to you move them. They're muktzeh. These are things that are set aside to make clothing from it. So because it's muktzeh, you can't use it. So the point is though that the Braise is pointing out the halacha of atmana even regarding these things, that it's not the derech to use for atmana. So Abaye says Yagid olav reye. We could use here the lashon of the pasuk that the friend notifies to you, which means like this: Tana hachaslayim. Here, the Tana de Braise, in the list of things that produces heat, it mentions the flintstone, v'huadin l'chayil. And the same will apply over here as well, that sand will also be something that is a problem that it produces heat. Okay, so over here, though, it's mentioning the slime as the thing that produces heat. And Tana hasam chayil v'huadin slime. And over there, in Shabbos, when it talks about atmana, it mentions clearly the sand, which is an issue. And you understand, you could learn from our Mishnah that the same is regarding slime. So each one of these two Mishnayos adds a certain detail and teaches the other case, the other Mishnah, that the same applies there as well. So Rav asks on this answer, if the point here is that the Mishnah does not have to repeat all in both Mishnahs and you learn from one to the other, if so, lisninu l'kulu b'chadeh, let it just say the whole list of those things that produce heat by one of these Mishnayos. And then v'lisni chad minaya bi'idach. Then it just has to mention one of them by the other Mishnah, and I would understand that v'hu adin li'idach, that all the others apply there as well. If you're saying the point is that you don't have to say the list twice, so why does it say most of the list twice and just one of them are switched between one and another? You could just say one by one of the Mishnahs and the rest in another Mishnah, and you can learn from there. So this can't be the right answer for the switch here in the two Mishnayos. So therefore Rav answers like this. The reason why it doesn't mention in Shabbos that the halacha of atmana in the flintstones, mishum the mashtachila lekedera, because they ruin the pot. And Rashi says mashtachi actually usually means that it rusts, but over here it means that it breaks. It breaks the pot, so people don't want to usually do the hatmana in these flintstones. Because that's why it doesn't say it there. Now, the Tosfos here adds, even though we already mentioned before, we tried to give this answer, that it doesn't say over there because it's not the derech, but now Rav is saying more. It's not only that it's not the derech, it's not the derech at all. People don't do this at all, even less than what we mentioned before regarding l'shaynes shel argomon and things like that. This is something that people don't do at all because the pashat breaks the pot. That's why it doesn't mention there the slime. Here, the reason why it doesn't mention sand, because the nature of this sand is when you insulate something which is hot and it heats up, then this sand becomes hot and it sort of produces heat. But when it's in an area which is cold, it actually it's cold and it produces it just makes things cold around it. So over here, having the sand near a wall where there's no source of heat that's heating up the sand, it's not an issue. So that's why it doesn't mention the sand over here. But the Gemara asks on this answer, but Vatani Rabbi and a Braise added to what it says in our Mishnah that you can't have the sand near someone else's wall. So we see that sand is a problem. Answers the Gemara, and the Hasam b'matuna. There it's talking about the issue of that sand is that it's moist. It's the moisture that is the problem, not the sand itself. In fact, the Gemara, if that's the case, Tana didan nami listening. So why doesn't our Tana count chayil when it's moist as well? The like b'matuna, let it count it in the list of things that it mentioned before, where the Mishnah talks about those things, that the issue is the dampness, the moisture. Why doesn't it mention this sand as well? And says the Gemara, it already says if you have a water channel or a water canal, so that it's a problem near someone else's wall. So the issue of moisture, it already says. It doesn't have to say separately another case of moisture regarding the sand. In fact, the Gemara, why? We see that the Mishnah gives more than one example of something that the issue is that it causes moisture. So why wouldn't it say another case also that the chayil, the sand, when it's moist, that it can break and damage other person's wall? And says the Gemara, Hanu tzrichi. Now the fact that the Mishnah mentions both the water channel and it mentions also the pool where you do the laundry in it, there's a reason why it says both of them. Because if it would only say the water channel, that's something where you dig it and it's there to stay. That's the way how the water flows into your property. So because it's something which is there to stay, that's why you're not allowed to do it near a person's wall. But this pool of water that you have that you dig in the ground, it's not something that's necessarily there to stay. It's very shallow. It's one tefach, and you can move it around. You can dig somewhere else also. So maybe I would think temporarily, it's not a problem if temporarily you have over here this pool of for the laundering near another person's wall. On the other hand, and if we would only say that you shouldn't have your laundry pool near his wall, I would say because here the water that's inside of it remains gathered and in one place all the time, as long as it's there. But when it comes to the water that flows through a water channel, it's just water flows through. It doesn't remain there sitting there, so it doesn't seep through. It won't cause so much damage. So it's a loy. I would say maybe there it's not a problem. So therefore it's necessary for the Mishnah to say both. But the case of choil, the moist choil, it wasn't necessary for the Mishnah to say. The next case of the Mishnah, marchikin es azroim v'samachreishu v'chulu. You have to distance where you're planting or where you're plowing in your field near someone's wall. So the Gemara asks, Zroyim, when it says that you have to distance your planting, why does it have to say that separately? It says it both, the planting and where you're plowing. The very fact that you're planting, doesn't that mean that you should be plowing there first? So the issue is the plowing even before you come to planting. And says the Gemara, we're talking here about a person that's planting without doing a proper plowing. He just takes a shovel, he digs a little, and he throws in the seeds. That itself is the issue, even without the plowing. On the other hand, the Gemara asks, Machreisha, when it says that the issue is that you're not allowed to plow near someone's wall, but why do we have to say that separately? If you're plowing, you're probably plowing in order to plant. So once you say that you're not allowed to plant there, so a person's not going to plow in that area. So why do you have to say the plowing separately? And says the Gemara, no, we're not talking about plowing in order to plant. A person that's plowing the area for the benefit of trees that are there. But over here, whether you're plowing and planting near someone else's wall, so the issue should be, besides the fact that you're softening the ground because of the plowing and so on, but this issue of the water. You have to be watering your plants. That should be the issue, the water. And so the Gemara, Tana be'Eretz Yisrael koi. The Tana, the Mishnah, is teaching the halacha regarding the fields that are in Eretz Yisrael. In Eretz Yisrael, they didn't have to water the fields. They didn't have necessarily a source of water from where to take water to water the fields. They just rely on rainwater. So that's the issue. The problem here is not the fact that you're constantly watering your fields, because they rely on the rainwater. So the Gemara asks on this, so then what does it come out of here? What's the issue then? The only problem with the Zroyim is the fact that when you plant, so now you have the roots of the vegetables that you planted that spread out. That's seemingly what the problem is, that it damages someone else's wall. It's not the issue of the fact that you're watering it, because that is that you rely on the rain. And this is just that this is not the same what the Gemara said at Daf before on Daf Yud Ches. On Daf Yud Ches, the Gemara over there said matunta, that Zroyim, the issue is the moisture. But here the Gemara says that no, the issue is not the water. Here the issue is the fact that the roots spread out. Okay, so the Gemara asks, remember the Zroyim litzdaden kamishtarshi. Is it true that when you plant the vegetables or whatever plants there are, so the roots spread out to the sides and it could spread out to a wall, so you have to distance 3 tvachim. But v'ha tanan, we learned in the Mishnah in Klayim, halacha regarding Klayim, that hamavrich es hagevem ba'aretz, a person that draws down a branch from a vine and he puts it into the ground. So this is the way they would want to plant a new vine. So what you would do is they would stick this branch of the vine into the ground, and then in an area further away, the end of this branch, they would bring it out in an area further away, and then it would grow a new vine in that area further away. And then eventually they could even cut off this branch from the original vine and it would grow a new vine further away. That's the inyan of mavrich. This is the famous source of the lashon of bracha, mavrich, to bring down, hamshacha. This is where it comes from, mavrich. Ashir says mavrich means like vayavrich hagamalim, when the camels go down. Okay, so now you have this branch of the vine that's under the ground. Now, in ein al gaba offer shloisha tvachim, if on top of this branch of the vine that's under the ground, it's not deep enough that it's not 3 tvachim into the ground, lo yavi zera aleha. So you can't plant any vegetables, any other zrayim on top of it, on top of this branch that goes under the ground, because then it's going to be an issue of klayim. Now, v'tani Allah, and on this we learned, Aval zereya esatzdodin elech ve'elech. But you could plant on the side of this branch that's now under the ground, on the sides of it, on one side, the other side, you are allowed to plant vegetables. So what do we see from this? That if you're planting vegetables on top of this vine, that's the branch of the vine that's under the ground, so then the roots go down. As long as it's not 3 tvachim deep, it's going to go down, and therefore there's issue of klayim. But if it's on the side of it, so then the roots of the zera, of the zrayim, do not spread out to where the vines are, and therefore it's not a problem. So how can we say here, when you plant zrayim near a wall, that the roots spread out to the wall? So the Gemara answers, Amar Rab Chaged, Mishem, Rab Yosi, that over here, you're right, the roots of the Zra'im don't spread out, but nevertheless, it does soften the ground around these Zra'im, and instead of having nice, good, hard earth, you get the soft soil where you plant, and therefore it changes the nature of the earth around, and it's going to be a problem for the foundation of this wall. And the Mishnah said, you also have to distance urine from the wall 3 tvachim. Amar Rabba Bava Basra said, you are allowed to urinate near a wall of your friend. What's the source? Because the pasuk says, Abisha says, I will wipe out, I will eliminate, I will annihilate all of the descendants of Achov, and the pasuk uses the term mashten bekir, the one that urinates by a wall. The Gemara understands that this refers to people that they urinate by the wall, v'otzer v'ozav b'Yisrael, and those that are held up amongst Yidden. So the point is, though, that you see here that mashten bekir is something that people do, and it's considered to be normal. So therefore he said, you're allowed to be mashten, you're allowed to urinate by a wall. But in our Mishnah it says that you have to distance 3 tvachim the meiraglayim from the wall. Answers the Gemara, Hasam b'shoivchin. In our Mishnah, it's not talking about a person that's urinating. It's talking about a person that takes a pail of urine and he pours it out by the wall. That's something that, if you want to dispose of it, you should do it 3 tvachim away from the wall. Okay, we have here another braise. According to some, you're not good at it. It says basically the exact same point. Tashema leyishbech odamayim b'tzad kaisel shel chaveiroi elam ken hichik mimena gimel tvachim. So this is again a question. You see that you shouldn't pour it unless you're 3 tvachim away. And the Gemara answers the same point. Hasam nami b'shoivchin. Over there, you're pouring out a pail, not just a person that's urinating by the wall. But here the Gemara brings though from another braise. Tashema, the braise says, Lo yashtin odom mayim b'tzad kaisel shel chaveiroi. The braise clearly says that a person should not urinate near his friend's wall. So, elam ken hichik mimena gimel tvachim, unless you distance 3 tvachim. And the braise adds, B'medvar mamurim b'kaisel levenim. When is it a problem for the wall if this is made from bricks that are made from tit, from cement or from clay that can get softened by the urine, so it's going to ruin the wall. But if it's a wall made from stones, so then so 3 tvachim, it's not necessary to be so far. It can be even closer, but as long as it doesn't ruin the wall. And it says here, how much is that? Tefach. 1 tefach away is good enough. And the shaltzunma, if it's a wall that's built on like a bedrock, it's hard rock under it, so then mutter, then you don't have to distance at all. But the point is, you see clearly here in the beginning of this braise, what are we talking about? Not a person that's spilling out a pail of urine. We're talking about loy yashton adam. The person may not urinate near the wall. To Yufte, the Rabba Bar Chana, so that refutes what Rabba Bar Chana said, that it's allowed. To Yufte, it's a refutation of what he said. Frek Gemara, but v'ha Rabba Bar Chana kra ka'amar. He brings from a pasuk where it says this lashon of mashten bekir regarding a person, which seems like that it's a normal thing. And says the Gemara, hasam hachi kalmar. What that pasuk is actually talking about is not a person. Afile midi the darke leshtune bekir. That when the Eibishter will kill out and destroy everything from Achav, even something that's not a human being, and the Eibishter will also take away from him. At the pasuk there says Mashtim Bekir, and then it says Va'atzav Va'azav. I think Atzav Va'azav actually goes on his possessions, but over here, what is it talking about? The My Niu Kalba, even a dog that belonged to him, the Eibishter will also destroy and get rid of. Okay, Atkan is the explanation of the lashon of the Mishnah. The Gemara here brings in now a whole different sugya of Tumah and Tareh B'Negeiah to the opening between one house and another house, or one room and another. And as we'll see, Taisus points out that because in the continuation of the Gemara, it'll connect it, it'll bring a raya from our Mishnah, therefore it brings up the subject here. Okay, so now the point over here is there's a tumah of oil. When you have a dead body which is inside the house, so everything that's inside that house becomes tameh. Now, if there's a chaloin, if there's an opening between this room and another room, or this house and another house, so then that tumah spreads through that window. If it's open a tefach, it'll spread. The tumah will spread into the other house. So here, what Shmuel will discuss, with the halacha of Shmuel, will be whether you want to minimize that opening of a tefach. As long as it's less than a tefach, then the tumah does not spread. So Amar Rav Tovi Bar Kisne, Omar Shmuel, Rakik, if you put a thin wafer in the opening of this tefach, a tefach of an opening between one house and another house, and you have a mace in one house, and there's a tumah of oil, so that rakik that you put there does not minimize that opening of a space of a tefach to prevent the tumah of passing through. And the reason is because this rakik is something that is not meant to stay there. A person's going to take it to eat. The only thing that's going to minimize that space of the tefach so the tumah can't pass through is something that you put there and it stays there permanently. So the Gemara now clarifies why he said dafka, this case of a rakik, of a thin wafer. Ma yer rakik, why is he saying a thin wafer? Afilo ava namila, even if it's a bigger, thicker piece of cake or something else that he left there, the halacha should be the same thing. So the Gemara answers, Loi mibaya kamar. Now he's trying to say a bigger chiddush. Loi mibaya ava, needless to say that if you put there a bigger piece of cake or something like that, that's not going to minimize the space of the tefach in this window. Kivin the achzile, since it's something that he can eat. So it's not something that he's leaving there. He's not leaving it there by the window. So it's not going to be mamayit, that space of opening of a tefach. But if it's a thin wafer, what happens is when you put it there by the window in this wall, it becomes disgusting because there's moisture there, and therefore it's something that we could say that you're not going to take ever away because you're not planning on eating it. So I would think that once you put it there and it becomes ma'os, he leaves it there, and therefore it should minimize that opening of a tefach. Kamash Malon, therefore Shmuel said that even this is something that you would be taking away, and it does not take away from the space of a tefach. Okay, I think one has another question on this. We're talking here about food. The tepik lei davle davar shum mekabel tuma. Why shouldn't we say that it can't minimize this opening of a tefach for a different reason? Because it's something that's mekabel tuma. It's food. Food is mekabel tuma. And the rule is v'chol davar shehu mekabel tuma. Anything that you put within such an opening to minimize the opening to prevent the tumah of going through, if this object itself that you put in there is something that it could be mekabel tumah, ein chaytzitz b'fnei tumah, it does not separate, it does not hold back the tumah of coming through. So this rakik or ova, whatever food it is that you put there, it's mekabel tumah. How could it? Why does Shmuel have to say because you take it away, so therefore it's not mekabel tumah? It's food. Answers the Gemara, no, this is actually something, it's food that's not mekabel tumah. Why? Shenilush b'mei peiris. Because this is a cracker, a cookie, or a wafer, whatever it is, that was baked only with fruit juice. So Rashi explains, in order for food to be mekabel tumah, it has to be come in contact with certain liquids that are machshir to be mekabel tumah. An example that Rashi says is whether it's water, wine, or milk. There's others, there's yad, shach, adam. There has to be certain liquids that are machshir to be mekabel tumah. But this is just made with fruit juice, so it's a food item that's not susceptible to tumah, and therefore it could separate the tumah, and that's where the halacha of Shmuel comes in. And this is the point there of Shmuel, that when you put something there as a separation, but you're going to take it away, so then it does not separate from the tumah, it does not block the tumah. Okay, so this Gemara asks, Meisvei, it says in the Mishnah, Kupa Malaya Teven, if you have a box or a barrel that's full of straw, of a chavis Malaya Greigeris, or a barrel that's full of figs. Okay, pressed figs, dry figs, Rashi says, and we must be talking about over here with figs that were not mukhshir to be mekabel tumah, they're totally dry. So because otherwise, once it's mekabel tumah, it doesn't fit in here. Okay, hamanachim b'chalaim. So they're lying in that position by the opening of a window. And now again, the question over here is: are they things that can separate from the tumah, block the tumah of coming through? So it depends. So here, the point that this Mishnah is based on is that the actual box or the barrel itself is a keli. A keli is something which is makabel tumah. So as we just said, something which is makabel tumah, even if it blocks the window, it's not going to block the tumah because this itself is makabel tumah. So the box or the barrel is not going to block. It's the straw or the figs that are not makabel tumah. If they can stand there themselves, they're going to block the tumah. So therefore, Rayim we have to see. If you take away the box or the barrel, and the straw or the figs will stay there in their position by itself without the barrel or the box, so then chaytzitzin. So they themselves create that blockage of the tumah to go through. But v'mlav, if they can't stand there themselves without the box of the barrel holding them up, then ein chaytzitzin. It's not going to create any chatzitza because you're relying on the box and the barrel to be there to create the chatzitza, but the box and the barrel are mekabel tumah. They themselves are a keli. That's the halacha of that Mishnah. Okay, but now the question though is regarding the straw. The Gemara is going to address both the straw and the figs that could be a blockage of the tumah. But won't the person use the straw to give to feed to his animal? The rule of Shmuel is anything that a person will eventually take away to use, then it's not going to create a blockage for the tumah to go through. So this teven is something the person is going to take away. And says the Gemara, Besaria. This Mishnah must be talking about straw, which is spoiled. They can't even give it for animal feed either. It could still be used to make out of it cement. And says the Gemara, no, it's talking about straw that can't be used even for that. The ispe koitzi, because it has thorns in it, and to make the cement, they would usually step in it barefoot to crush it, and with thorns, they don't use it this way. The Gemara, it could still be used for fire, for firewood. So the Gemara says, no, it can't. That Mishnah is talking about bimatuna. It's moist, so it can't be used. If you have a very big fire, then even if it's moist, you can use it as well. And says the Gemara, no, but hesed gadol loy shchiach. Such a large fire, something that's not so common, so therefore the person will usually leave it there. So therefore this is something which will prevent the tumah of passing through. Now the Gemara asks regarding the other case it mentioned, which is the figs, that the figs could block the tumah. The figs, the person can take it, he can eat it. Answers the Gemara, we're talking about figs that became wormy and the person is not eating it, he's leaving it there. That they became wormy. Okay, so that's why none of these cases here are a question on Shmuel. But now, because we brought up this Mishnah, the Gemara asks regarding the barrel that was mentioned here. It said that the barrel itself is mekabel tumeh, so therefore it can't serve as a blockage in this opening, in this chaloim between one house and another. What kind of a barrel are we talking about over here? So the Gemara now understands a barrel we're talking about is a cheres, an earthenware barrel. The halacha of an earthenware barrel is that it's only mekabel tumeh from the inside, mitoichai, from the back, from the outside of it, it's not mekabel tumeh. So now what are we talking about over here? If the opening of the barrel is towards the house, that the mace is not there, so it's only exposed to the house of the mace with the outside of this keli, so then he go for techetz. So then the halach of the Mishnah is not true. The Mishnah says that the chavis itself can't block. It has to be either the straw or the figs that are going to block. But why not? The barrel itself, because it's not facing inwards towards the mace, it should be able to block because it's not mekabel tumeh in that way. The Gemara spells out itself. The klicheres megabay, because the klicheres or earthenware keli does not become tameh from the back, from the outside. Hello. So the Gemara first answers, you could say the pumeh legav, that Mishnah is speaking about where the barrel is facing inwards to the place where the mace is. So it would be mekabel tumeh, and therefore it's only the straw or the figs that prevent the tumeh. If you buy say what the Gemara answers, lo'ilam the pumeh leba, can be talking about a barrel that's facing outward, but we're talking here about b'chavis shomatches, a metal barrel which is mekabel tumeh even from the outside.